But today is Friday, was it May 12th, 2017. This is the CP Coalition Friday call-in. Here with Tom Stemm, Executive Director of COSA, as well as CEO and founder of Rivet. We'll be talking about that in a little bit here. But for those of you who are less familiar with the history of the CP Coalition, want to give a just quick 2-minute background on where we started from, sort of the history of shared pains and the need for smarter PDFs. This dates back to 2013. You can see a picture here of Kyle Hughes of Skanska and Sasha Rita Bluebeam getting together, a dozen frustrated general contractors, myself included, about really the state of PDF drawings that we were receiving from architects and engineers, not understanding why, very quickly realizing that the designers were having many other similar frustrations, and the next year invited our design partners, identified things that they could control and certain things that they could not control. We produced our first version of the PDF guidelines for construction. Great just example of kind of blocking and tackling best practices of just what is an efficient hatch fill, so that when you have a PDF on an iPad, it zooms and renders faster and it doesn't have that slow lag that makes superintendents want to go back to paper. You know, how do we control these things and communicate? But at the end of the day, it was about workflows. It was really encouraging digital collaboration, and digital collaboration has so much to do with BIM. And so CP Coalition began engaging with BIM Forum, other BIM standards organizations, really trying to bridge that gap between the reality that we're all contracted to generally 2D drawings that are most often in PDF, but this desire to want to be in this single source of truth BIM world. So since then, you know, it's been sort of an interesting journey, obviously a learning journey. In 2017, we did make the official name change over from Construction PDF Coalition to Construction Progress Coalition. Not to say that we're any less focused on PDFs, just knowing that the vision and our whole purpose of connecting digital collaboration and open standards, and recognizing that where we come from as CP Coalition is representing the DBIO, designers, builders, inspectors, and operators. All the folks at the end of the food chain that are struggling to figure this stuff out and can't really talk to each other. They have to talk up through the channels, and we're trying to create sort of a groundswell grassroots group to connect best practices between these different folks that typically don't get opportunities to talk to each other. So the mission, again, we want to crowdsource the best practices, find out what's working in the industry, what's not, produce those into collaboration guidelines like the PDF guidelines for construction, and hopefully in the future other documents, and then media opportunities like this Friday call-in and other conference meetups to try and spread the word. The purpose here you can see is, again, how do we go about bringing that collaboration? I think everybody's looking for that standard, but they're looking for that one standard. So we're trying to be the communicator, the question asker, and the filter to digest, debate, decide, and deliver the best technology, the best collaboration, and the best integration possible using open source standards. So with that, I am so happy to have Tom Stemm on here. And Tom, you're telling me a little bit about your background, but why don't you tell me kind of your angle on coming into this wacky industry we're in?
Sure. So my background is in programming geek coming out of college a long time ago. So I've been working in the application layer, data layer, software layer for 20 years now. My focus in the construction industry is in my consulting background. I launched a technology consulting firm, which is really what Rivet grew out of, and we had an organic concentration in the construction space. So I've been working with construction companies for many years now and understand the industry well, I believe, and especially in terms of how technology is adopted and used in the industry, and then therefore where the opportunity lies for the industry to make better use of technology. And some of that based on my experience working in other industries, some that are better and worse than others in terms of their adoption and use of technology as well.
Awesome. And so tell me a little bit about how you came across, because I know I first learned about the Construction Open Standards Alliance, COSA, I don't know, probably 2-3 years ago when I first met James Benham, and I know you've come into that executive director role now. Tell me a little bit about how you found COSA. What was your interest in it from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, we found it through the AGC IT forum. Actually, was surprised to learn about it. Frankly, had not heard of it before. And in a similar vein, got to know James Benham and Benny Beltrowski. They were the pioneers of taking COSA out of AGC directly and trying to evolve technology providers' participation in developing and adopting standards for integration. So it seemed like a natural fit for me and my company to join Rivet at the end of the day as an integration platform focused on the construction industry. So it seemed relevant to get involved and learn about what was happening. And as James and Benny had spent a lot of the past, the few years preceding that, putting a lot of time and effort into growing COSA, they were looking for some new blood to step up and put some effort in. And so I raised my hand, and so here I am. And so now I'm, working with folks like you, Nathan, to figure out how we can position COSA to stand side by side with the industry and initiatives like Construction Progress Coalition in order to advance the cause across the board, both from the technology provider's perspective and the industry's perspective.
So for those who maybe don't know, the folks we're talking about before, James Benham with JB Knowledge, they got a product, Smart BidNet, that is all about, GCs and subcontractors sharing bid information electronically, digitally. Benny Balchowski with eSub, again, sort of a project management solution, collaboration solution. So I can see, and I know from my experience, that the AGC XML file type was really trying to help connect. I guess, was it mainly cost information, or what was it, all kinds of information? Because I mean, we come from the PDF world where we're just trying to make sure that our sheet names match and our grid lines are aligned. But it sounds like you were coming at it from a little bit different angle. Was it mostly the cost information, or what information did you care about sharing as COSA, I guess?
It wasn't just cost. No, in fact, I believe that there's still a lot of opportunity in the cost realm in order to improve standard development. It kind of spans the spectrum, if you will. There's a lot of different endpoints that we've tackled, from RFIs to submittals to time data to application for payment, owner draw requests, change orders, things like that. So definitely some areas of cost, and then just some areas of processing some of the standard transactions. I think we had mapped it out once, and we had identified somewhere between, depending on how you slice a few pieces of it, but somewhere between 20 and 25 sort of standard workflows that exist in the industry. And I think from COSA's perspective, our goal is to cover all of those scenarios. If you're talking about a single transaction, we tend to look at integration and therefore how data moves within any given workflow in kind of two ways. There's the organization-centric view. Tom Stemm Construction Company, and I need the applications that I use to move that data around efficiently. So, we're going to talk a little bit about RFIs today. So if I'm using, for some reason, multiple systems that touch RFIs, I need those systems to engage that data efficiently without me having to waste time and effort retyping, things like that. But then there's also project-centric integration where, we need to collaborate with other partners, so our subs, our owners, our design team, et cetera. And therefore, we need to be able to move data around outside of our own organization as well. And so we kind of view it from two angles, and then we kind of view it across the spectrum. But really where, COSA has become somewhat synonymous with AGC XML, and frankly, we're trying to break that link. It's certainly where we grew out of, but it's not where we're going. And so XML as a data format exists in terms of how our standards are written today, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the only payload that the standards could be delivered in, quote unquote, tomorrow. So
yeah, because Here's a question for you. I think was the original idea, obviously probably not today with cloud and the API world that we're dealing with, but was the idea that people would actually just share a .agc XML, just like a .pdf file, and that would have all that information if you're going like the project centric mainly, because a lot of stuff that we deal with is the project centric, or we would refer to it as vertical integration between the designers, the builders, the inspectors. Was the idea that the ADC XML was a file that would share, or was it something more on the back end?
Um, yeah, I think you could think about it like that, because like if you look at the RFI standard, for instance, that exists, there was a lot of effort put into that in terms of really defining kind of the core roles that are involved in that workflow, and then how data could flow, and then how you would write that data, how you would format that data, etc. So yeah, I think it was about as much about creating a format as much as it was also about creating a sort of standard definition around how you would collaborate and therefore transmit that data back and forth. I think we can evolve from there, because when that effort started in the AGC, we were where we were from a technology perspective. XML was sort of the standard at large at the moment from a technology perspective. We've evolved since then, and so I think the standards need to evolve in order to leverage more modern technology concepts. JSON is a very popular one today, but maybe it won't be forever. So at the end of the day, the standards need to be flexible to take into account. In my opinion, standards need to evolve beyond just this is how you format data, but also how do you take action on data. I think action data set where sometimes there are gaps, because most of the time from the end user's perspective or the industry's perspective, that's what they're seeking, is they're seeking to take action, and movement of data is how action is performed. And so a lot of times that's done offline. The image you have up right now is a great example of that. I believe that when you kind of look at that one you have highlighted, it says the GC's review an RFI instance of the design team. My experience with most folks in the industry is that most of the RFI processing is done manually through email, for instance. So there's all of this manual back and forth, maybe a phone call, maybe emails are flying around. And then the tools that we have in place are really just a document repository, if you will, to capture that data and reflect status of that data, but it's not used to take action on that data. And so I think that there are some interesting opportunities that we can help promote to make processing of something as simple as an RFI far more efficient and effective.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and you made some comments there that were almost exactly why the Construction PDF Coalition had to become the Construction Progress Coalition, because it's true. Who knows how quickly an AGC XML becomes, not relevant, because cloud APIs are to a certain point, and who knows? Obviously, PDFs are not going anywhere anytime soon. But there may be a day in the future where there isn't a need for them because everything has moved up into the cloud. But yeah, I think the challenge that we're dealing with is how do we digitize and make an efficient communication of this very traditional process, whether it's a bid process, whether it's an RFI, whether it's a submittal, or just the drawing set communication, because we all know the hardest thing in this business is all the different people that have to do their different tasks in order, and that sort of orchestration, that alignment is extremely difficult to do, and technology can enable it, but it's certainly not going to solve that problem for us. So I think it's great. Why don't you talk a little bit about from your angle from Rivet, because I know like Jeff Sample from Gallegos, I think is trying to figure out some cool opportunities for where you guys fit in, and some other folks. So where do you see the greatest opportunity for kind of that return on investment of integrations in the construction space today?
So from my perspective, integration at the end of the day is an automation technique, and sort of industry at large, one of the biggest things people are generally concerned about are protecting margins and finding ways to reduce labor costs and allocation of that cost. And so I think that finding methods to automate as much activity as possible in order to kind of do two things. So the thing that we generally joke about with some of our customers is, I'm going to give you time back, not so you can go home early, but so you can do more work. And so ultimately, we want to increase productivity, and we want to expand opportunity to do more efficient processing of these transactions, because integration allows you to basically repeat any process that you're performing in your company if it's repeatable. And even if it's repeatable in a way that there's still some decisions that have to be made in that process, but those decisions, generally speaking, can be broken down in a pretty clear way, then integration is available to allow you to completely automate those processes. And so, we kind of look at integration in two big ways. There's this system-to-system synchronization concept. I need my employee list in system A to match my employee list in system B. But then the second layer of that is really workflow or inter-application workflow, and how do I take an action on occurred in this system and then have that complete automated record activity on another system, and then tie those two systems together in a more streamlined capacity, as if I were sitting there typing in both systems. And so, that's what we're seeking to perform in terms of where we really want to provide ROI. I mean, a really basic example I can offer is, we worked with a customer. I just had a call with a customer this morning, for an example, who is currently typing in about 100-page credit card bill. It takes them about anywhere between 80 and 100 hours a month for their team to process that, and we're going to automate it and give them probably 75 to 90 of those hours back, and they're going to be able to use those hours far more effectively on something more important and more productive than retyping data off a credit card bill. So huge opportunities, because if you take that across the industry, across every company that are doing those types of activities, then think of the efficiency gains across the entire industry at large. So we're hoping to make a really big impact.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the origin of CP Coalition from the beginning, was this ability inside of batch tools in Bluebeam to do batch hyperlinking, to do batch overlay, do batch slip sheets. But then you realize that automation is only as good as the quality of the information coming in, and that it does come down to standards. And I think this is probably a good segue actually into the next section, which is how we're trying to together, and for those on the call that are not aware, on August 2nd of this year in Denver, which is the day before the AGC IT Forum that Tom was just mentioning earlier, we are going to have a one-day open integration summit where we want to pair half industry, half technology. So it'll be 15 folks representing the different folks in the industry. We've already got confirmations from Benjamin Crosby and Sample and some other folks looking to get some great technology sponsors that are also in the space trying to solve these problems, to come together and develop a collaborative report that says, here are the standards that exist. Here are the ones that are being followed. Here are the ones that are not being followed. Here's how the reality that some people are going to use PDFs, some people are going to use IFCs, some people are going to use cloud APIs, some are going to use AGC XML, and that regardless of which one they're using, they should have the same underlying language. It's for those who understand internet language, it's sort of this whole idea of once HTML became the standard, that's really where the internet became a lot more free. And I think as an industry, we have to demand that as the users and as the integrators. So that was sort of my 30-second elevator pitch. Anything you want to add on to that, Tom, from the COSA side?
Yeah, again, I think from the technology provider perspective, we want to enable the industry. We want to see technology transform the way folks are operating and establish far more capability and productivity across the entire spectrum. And so we want to engage the audience more effectively than we've been able to do in the past, because as I said, we have 25 workflows that we want to enable from the technology side. One of the things we've struggled with is feedback, accessibility, and adoption from the industry in terms of gaining that audience. And so I think in partnership with CPC, it's going to be really beneficial to both sides, because we're going to be able to come to the table from our perspective and really learn sort of what works, what doesn't work, where are the gaps, what are we not thinking about, because as well as we know our customers, that doesn't necessarily mean we're also the ones in seats that are processing this activity and data all day, every day either. So.
Absolutely. And I told Ruben earlier I was going to call him out on this, but I'm curious from an engineer's perspective, a professional engineer, are RFIs a good thing or a bad thing?
RFIs are a normal part of the process, as far as
good answer.
Whether or not they're a good thing or a bad thing depends on what's going on out in the field.
Yeah.
They're expected, they're budgeted for, they're planned for. They do take some time to turn around. As was mentioned, a lot of them are handled via email, although we do maintain a auditable trail, either in a master spreadsheet or utilizing something like ProjectWise to track information, so that we have a record copy of anything that we do. It does involve heavily on the relationship between our engineers and the client rep or the contractor of the alternative delivery project, as to how we do perform the process, because we will have different requirements or different forms or different standards depending upon what agency we're working for.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that's a perfect segue, because I actually found this report recently, of course, just Googling things, but a gentleman out of Boulder was a lawyer or so legal consultant, wrote a really interesting research report, or they developed this report on RFIs, and it tells exactly that story you're talking about, Ruben, of why they were there in the first place. That the kind of the need for them, especially in the 50s and the 60s, as professional liability insurance became more important, and we had to document these things. But then it became very cumbersome and it became almost a battle. And it even explains in here how contractors have sort of used that to their advantage in more traditional contracts. And this is why we need to redefine contracts. That I would argue that RFIs in a design, bid, build world probably are a bad thing, but RFIs in a more collaborative design, build, or integrated project world, if they're happening earlier, are a good thing. So a lot of times we associate things negatively or positively with certain words, but we really need to understand where they come from and the value to each person, engineer and builder and owner.
Well, I would disagree that RFIs could be considered a bad thing, in that we have engineers that design information for a specific design process, making assumptions as to how a contractor who has not won the project, we don't even know who the contractor is going to build a project. However, a contractor may have a means and methodology that differs significantly from the construction staging process that we come up with, and they will make an RFI to say, hey, we've got all this type of stuff, we've got this technique for building your structure, is that cool, guys? And it might be very beneficial to the client, and it might be something that is impossible to use. The contractor has to go with the original system. But if they don't ask that question, if they just make an assumption, the client is going to take it in the teeth. So I would encourage contractors to send an RFI for a design if they have any questions or concerns about the constructability of something that we've designed.
Yeah, I think one of the stats I know they brought up somewhere in the report is that at least 25% of RFIs don't ever even get answered. And why is that? Do we feel like we're just sort of throwing things over the fence? So I think you make a good point. I certainly don't want to give any negative connotations to RFIs. I just know as a contractor we tend to do that, or certainly designers tend to not like them because the design's perfect, right? But I think early RFIs are always a good thing. And at the end of the day, they just become a burden. And so part of this summit, part of what we're trying to do is make the valuable part of it more effective, and make the non-valuable, the frustrating part of it trying to eliminate that through better backend integration so that we can get just to that communication part. And sometimes at the end of the day, it's just recognizing that picking up the phone is better than sending an email or sending it in some cloud tool. I think there's certainly a
Yeah,
human aspect to the change as well.
Nathan, to add on to that, I think
Yeah.
the opportunity is that likely my perspective would be that sometimes the quote unquote pain felt in having to process RFIs is because, again, what I see at large is most of the time it's done in a very manual context, as you just said. You have to pick up the phone, you have to email, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's a difference between communication and processing, and the processing activity of RFIs, generally speaking, is a very manual activity these days, which makes it hard to get the answer to the questions that you have instead of making that a very streamlined process. So, what we can do from a technology perspective should be enabling this process more efficiently so that it doesn't feel painful, and it is simply, as Ruben said, something where it's like, hey, I have a question about this design and I need an answer and I need it efficiently so I can keep moving forward and there's no delay in the process, et cetera. So anyway, wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, and part of the standardization part of it, because what we're trying to do is make all this stuff easier. I think from the language perspective, what is the definition of an RFI? What needs to be a formal RFI versus an informal RFI? But at the end of the day, they should still be tracked and measured and organized the same. It's just some get tagged as having to go through some formal, probably government manual process. Whereas if it doesn't meet that requirement, but it's still a question, what is this kind of pre-RFI or virtual RFI or something else that's a new concept I think is very foreign to folks that they don't always think about on design build projects. That, why do you do an RFI? And does it have to be the complete formal RFI, or can you have a more informal process? I don't know if anyone that's on the call has had experiences or opportunities where they've been able to do that before. I know I have. Or even, I'm actually curious. I see David's on. Are you there, David Recker? From Bluebeam conferences, I've heard stories from both of you about some maybe downstream experiences. I'm curious, maybe David first, on the sustainability side of things. What have you seen? Because I'm sure there's these, maybe not be called a full request for information, but there's a lot of that same data handoff on that side. Or what have you seen related to standardizing kind of these requests for information in different formats?
Yeah, the sustainability side is, I almost felt like we were on a different planet sometimes when it came to that. Like I think I'll freely admit that I probably caused more angst with the contractors than not. Just in terms of, we were kind of this third party coming in, looking at a site and saying crazy things like, "Oh, those are the wrong toilets." Or seeing their drawings in the trailer and realizing that those aren't the up-to-date ones. And so I think from my standpoint, the RFIs came in the form of like, hey, our sustainability consultant says that this is supposed to be specified and it's not. What's going on? And so I never got involved in the official, like, filling out of that.
I think the main point is, isn't that a completely separate workflow from what would be a traditional RFI? So it's another log from another person, then another person. And at the end of the day, how many of those things come down to a design change or a clarification or a material change or a differing site condition that could fall into these same categories, but because someone else built it in their own way based on their standard, they go, oh, well, it's too late now. A part of this is, how do we have the conversation to connect these different dots and find the things that are similar, even though we know that there's obviously a difference between sustainability design issues and a true, field constructability RFI.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of learning that happened on our end. Like the company I started with was really early days for lead certification. By the time I left, I'd like to think that our process was a lot more streamlined in terms of we focused more of our effort to get involved as early as possible before the building was even being built, because we were just finding that assumptions would just get made. Oh, we're getting LEED silver, that means X, Y, Z, and we were like, hey, owners, if you're going to hire us, you have to. The cost is the same. Hire us early.
Well, so let's go into the owners conversation, because we're bumping up on our 30 minutes and we got started a little bit late, but because we do have our official owner representative Alan Engel on the call, that I might have to unmute you because I know you were making noise earlier. But I am curious because Jeff asked a question here: how do we change owners' views when it comes to RFIs? We have owners that that have in the contracts to put no RFIs, which was part of my point, I think, to Ruben earlier of demonizing RFIs. Have you had to face that conversation before, Alan? If you're there,
can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
I mean, so I look at it, if you think about it this way, and actually thinking back to when I was on the architectural side as well, is I completely agree. This is not a bad thing. It stands for request for information. It's not a YAW, you are wrong. And so many times it's taken that way. As soon as an architect gets an RFI, it's taken that way. And then I think because of that connotation and the adversarial relationships we've had in the past, then when the owner finds out there's 300 RFIs on a project, they automatically think something's wrong. Then they automatically go back to the architect of what he did and why did the contractor have to send 300 RFIs. But if those are 300 RFIs working between a collaborative organization to come to a complete understanding of what's going on, that's not a bad thing. It's a collaborative process, and that's you two collaborating within a formal situation, because if you don't formalize it, it's going to end up biting somebody if it becomes a legal issue. So we are going to have to formalize it, but it doesn't have to mean it's a bad thing. And I think the problem is email became so easy of the recent past that we started sticking RFIs in emails. They didn't become official, and things were happening that weren't being documented the way they should. And I'm easy to blame on that when I'm on the architectural side, because it's so easy to answer a question that a contractor sends you that seems very innocent. It's just a process. We still need to officially document it.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think this will end up being probably a conversation topic that will go into the report that will come out of. You can see here on the summit agenda that the step 4 is to deliver a post-summit summary that will talk about owners requesting no RFIs, and that's a bad thing, and we'll make that very clear and want to have a very clear and succinct message back to the industry, not to say you should do it this way, but to say here are the things that are not working. And here are the questions you should be asking as a project team to better develop your project-specific standards. And hopefully that'll be based on an industry data standard that COSA can help us with. So I guess with that, Tom, any final thoughts, or how can folks learn more if they are on the technology side of things? Because again, I think if CP Coalition is the designers, builders, inspectors, operators, I sort of see COSA trying to support all open standards for kind of the technology developers and integrators side of the world. So how else can folks that are interested learn more about COSA?
All of our standards are published on our website, so COSA.build. Please visit the site. Feel free to contact us through that if you want to learn more, get involved. There's ample opportunity for more effort to be applied to help accelerate some of the standards development that needs to occur to evolve existing standards and then close the gap on standards that are missing. And so no shortage of opportunity.
Absolutely. And anyone who is interested in either participating as an industry member or as a technology sponsor, you can send an email to cpcoalition@outlook.com. And this will be up on the website probably within the next week or so, advertising. So again, for everyone who called in, always appreciate your time. We know how busy you are, and thanks for participating. We'll have this up on the YouTube channel for everyone to share if you want to share the conversation that we had. And again, Tom, thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to working together with COSA, and looking forward to this event on August 2nd.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.